Welcome everyone to Scarecrow Miniature Painting. I'm Steven, and today we are going to be painting this werebear. As I said in the first episode that I ever posted on the channel, this would be our first miniature. Now I'm going to move this miniature out of the way so it does not get ruined. But I want to show you the process first of what I do. So obviously you're going to need your paintbrushes. Now each paintbrush has a different use. You have some paintbrushes that are made specifically for dry brushing. You have some that are made specifically for blending. And as you can see, tight angles. So what we're going to do first is we got to get our paints into the ready position, as I call it. So what I mean by that is you want to thin your paints. So you want to thin it down to about a 3-to-1 ratio of paint to water. So I usually just take a napkin and put the paint in after I put the water in. So you want water because you're going to be cleaning your paintbrush every so often, depending on the model. Now, obviously, we're doing a werebear. There's not a lot that we're going to be changing up on it when it comes to making sure that we're washing our paintbrushes and everything like that. But first thing I want to do is you got to shake up the paint. You want to make sure that that's good and ready. So, like I said in the first video, we're going to be doing a different technique than what a lot of people commonly do. And that's because I want to try something a little bit different. Now, when it comes to painting, and you're wanting to do dry brushing, because we're going to be doing that today, you want to make sure that your dark color, and it's hard to tell with the light I'm in right now, but this is the lighter color. This is the darker color. You want to make sure that the darker color is your base coat. So, of course, you want to shake your brush, your paints. Now, with Army Painter, I highly recommend, even after shaking it up, putting it on a napkin. At least a couple of drops of it, because that will make sure that you got all the medium out of there. Now, we're going to be doing it a little bit differently. We're going to use Monster Brown, or my apologies, Fur Brown, as the base coat. I think I just used the, yes I did. Okay, no problem there. So we're going to be doing Fur Brown as the base coat. Actually, yep, that's right. My apologies, I thought I had wet mud here. It's an effect paint we're going to be using later. I had that there. I thought that I'd put it on the wrong thing. Now we're going to be using Necromancer Cloak for the eyes, and I'm thinking we might even do the inside of the ear a little bit with it, but definitely the claws, and we're going to highlight that with a wolf gray. Now the reason we're going to be doing wolf gray is it's a little bit lighter of a gray. And I think it looks like a very nice subtle gray, but it gives it a little bit of highlight. Now when doing highlights, you want to do personally 2 or 3. You can obviously go more, you can go less. I do 3, but with this wolf gray, with it being a lot lighter, because you really want to just move up one, we're going to be mixing it in first. We're going to be using matte black for the eyes. I changed that up just now. The reason why we're going to do matte black for the eyes is because it pops out more, and we got that nose. We want to make sure we hit. Get that medium out of there. Put it in there. We're going to be using Vallejo model wood grain for the handle. And because you don't want to mix too much of the coloring, or not mix isn't the right word, I would say more so you don't want to overcolor it in a way. And what I mean by that is you don't want to add too many colors, because then nobody knows where to focus their eyes on. I'm going to be using that there, and I'm going to be using for the nose, not the actual nose itself, but around the nose, I'm going to be using barbarian flesh. I'm going to mix that a little bit with the fur brown. This way we kind of get that fur feeling of it. Like, it's not too light, but it's not too dark. Put that there. We're going to be using gunmetal for the handle. Now, if you guys hear any shaking, that's a little ball bearing in here. Army Painter sells them. I'm pretty sure Vallejo does as well. I like them because it makes it to where you have a little bit more control over how you actually shake it. Without them, you can be sitting here shaking these for a while. You know, I changed my mind. We're not going to do the fur brown with the barbarian flesh. We're going to be using the monster brown instead. That one looks like it might be a better combination. So let's see. I've gotten you. So what I'm doing first is I'm focusing on what I am going to be putting down first. So next is mummy rope. Now, that's going to be for the teeth specifically. So we don't need a lot of it. We just need some of it. And we can also use it for highlighting later on down the road. I find that is the best practice, is not to use an actual white, but use an off-white. Dr. Faust, another YouTube channel, when I first started getting into miniature painting, he was my inspiration for a lot of what you're going to be seeing. Let's see here. We're going to be using the... Yeah, you know, we're going to be using the monster brown for that little base at the bottom too, but I might change that up to the necromancer flesh to make it look more like a mountainside. So, with that, let's get into painting. Let's grab a brush. Now, the brush I'm going to grab is typically considered a dry brush. There's a reason for that. I said in the first episode that I would be doing something a little bit unconventional. Here's what I meant by that. I'm going to be taking Red Tone by Army Painter. Now, this is a wash. And what I'm doing is commonly known as glazing. It's typically done after the base coat is put on. However, I want to try getting a little bit of these recesses to poke through as a reddish tint. Now, Army Painter what I love about them is they actually sell all of their washes, at least the dark, strong, and flesh tone, in a tub. Now, what I mean by a tub is, think of back when you were a kid and you got those little army men. And I know it's funny saying that, but you get that bucket of army men. That is essentially what they sell, but it is the washes. Now, as you can see, he's already getting a little bit of a pink hue to him. Now, this wash is going to specifically hit those crevices. Now, there's not a lot because of his fur, but that's the idea. Is you want to get all of the crevices. You don't want to do it too much because then you're going to be sitting here trying to wait for it to dry and it's going to pool. You don't want it to pool. So, an easy way to get it to not pool is to thin it. Not only on with the water, but also thin it by brushing it a little bit off and then brushing. Now, a lot of you that are getting into the hobby for the first time, you might be thinking, well, Steven, that sounds a little counterproductive. You're losing material by doing that. You're right, you are losing a little bit of material. However, these, I call them jars, tubs, tubes, the paints themselves, they range between $5 and $8, depending on where you get them. If you get them from Amazon, they're going to be a little bit cheaper, in my opinion, based on price point and everything like that. But this is why you don't want to do that. You see how it's pulling right there? I forgot to brush it off. Now, an easy fix to that is to take your brush and just take it around there and soak it up, brush it off, try to soak it back in your housing of your brush. That'll make sure that you get a nice, clean, even tone. But the good news is where I had that is where I want shadow. That's the whole point of the wash and the glaze, is to get in that shadow. So, with that, he is done there. We're going to let him dry for a little bit. So as you can see, as I get closer, there is a little bit of pulling on the blade itself of the axe. Now, I want a little bit of pulling. I don't want a lot. The reason why I want a little bit is because I'm going to be using another effect paint. If I can find where I put it. Let me make sure it's not in my other bag. And of course it is. Glistening Blood is the other effect paint we're going to be using. Personally, I love how it comes out because it makes, there's a couple techniques we can use to actually make that pop. Now, what I'm doing right now is I'm just taking my brush, drying it off, and getting into the recesses. I don't really want it to pull. Now, normally, when you're doing a wash or a glaze, you want to be as meticulous as possible with where you put that. So, we are going to let him dry. We're going to move on to his friend that comes with it. Now, all Nozzler figures come with, on the medium side, I should say, come with two figures. They come, this one came with a wereboar. Now, the reason we're going to do the wereboar next because I'm going to show you while he is drying, while the werebear is drying, how to paint a base coat. And I feel like that's a good one. Now, we might come back to the base coat of the werebear or wereboar after the fact, but I feel this is a good stepping stone. Now, for the wereboar, I'm going to be using the necrotic flesh. Now, you want to brush off as much as possible to where even with the thin paint, you can still see every detail possible. Now, with painting miniatures, it's not an exact science. What I mean by that is you're going to make a mistake. You're going to get paint where you don't want it to go. That's why it is best practice to do a base coat first. Now, I keep mentioning Army Painter this, Army Painter that, and he just fell off his base. So we're going to have to get him glued back on. Bear with me. I keep mentioning Army Painter and their products and how wonderful I feel they are. There's a reason behind that. As I said in the first video, that is where I started. My first set actually is sitting right there. I got the Mega set off Amazon. Now, when I got it, it was before inflation and everything like that. This was a little cheaper now than it is now. Trying to get him back on there so we can continue. Maybe if we can't get him back on there, maybe before we can, his buddy will be done, because it's looking like it's not wanting to stick no more. Now, I'm using Tamiya Extra Thin Cement. I like Tamiya just because of how strong of an abrasive it is, how strong it holds the miniatures. With these Nozzlers miniatures, they all come with individual bases. Now, you can buy your own, make your own, however you want to do it. With Nozzlers, I typically just use the base it comes with. But what you can also do with these Nozzler bases that a lot of people don't realize is you can really do whatever you want with them. A lot of people just see that it's already got a basing down. You can cover that up with some hodgepodge and go to town with sculpting out how you want it. The figures themselves, how they are printed, don't really give you the option to take control that much by taking the figure off the base and going from there. But they do give you some control, I will say that. So like I said, we're going to just start painting this wereboar, at least the base coat, while we wait for that werebear to dry. Now, all Nozzler miniatures come pre-primed. The first step you always want to do when doing a miniature is priming them. Just like with any painting, you always want to prime. Now, like I said, Nozzlers comes pre-primed. I typically do not prime my Nozzlers unless requested. The only reason why I don't prime it is because with it already being primed, I don't want to lose any detail. And Nozzlers, I love them because I am a big D&D fan, and they are the official D&D miniatures. However, they are already less detailed because of how they prime it. So what I do, as you can see, is I paint the entire miniature. Now see right there, I made another mistake. I did not brush off the paint. Now, the reason you want to brush off the paint before you start is because of the fact that you do not want it to pool just like with the wash. But also, you want a nice thin coat on the miniature itself. This way, you can make sure that when you do that second coat, all the details and all the recesses are there. Because with miniature painting, you want at least 2 coats on all of your minis. Sometimes I do 1 if it's my personal mini. If it is a commissioned mini, I will do 2. It's just a preference of mine because, as I said in the first video, I prefer just having them tabletop ready, which really just means, in a nutshell, ready to go on the table and go from there. So, as you can see with this guy, he's nice and primed. So I didn't do the base yet because we're going to be using the necro shade on these bases. But as I'm going around him, that's another thing you want to do. I'm going to make sure you've gotten everything. Because as I'm going around him, there's some spots I'm noticing I missed or might have dried up already. The reason you thin your paints is because you want to hide all of your brush strokes so they look as natural as possible. And if your paint is too heavy or condensed, you're not going to get that natural brush stroke down because it's going to pool and you're going to be able to see where you pulled the paint. My apologies there. Had a little bit of a yawn. So we are going to let this guy dry. Now, typically, it shouldn't take no more than 20-30 minutes for that to dry. But while we are letting him dry, we are going to move on to his buddy. Now, this is the one I'm excited for. Mainly because it's a simple miniature. But also because we did that red highlighting with the shade. I want to see how the fur looks with that. So just like we did with him, with the wereboar, the werebear, we're just going to do nice even strokes across the miniature. With the fur brown. We're still going to take off some of that so that we're not pulling it, we're not letting anything lose detail. Because like I said, with these Nosler's figures, they are already so lightly detailed in some areas. Now, I don't know if it's because of the printing process that they do, or if it is another reason for it. But like I said, I love Noslers. I will advocate them up and down. But there is some things that, just like everyone, they can work on. So just like with the wereboar, we're going to be going through the entire miniature from top to bottom. Now that's already looking better. Now this is a brown, and you already see in the recesses that little hint of red even popping through the brown. And I love that little detail. So the reason we want to make sure we do that tiny little detail is because we want to experiment. That's the whole point of painting. Experimentation. If you're not experimenting, you're going to run into, in my personal opinion, dread is the best word I can give, because you're going to think to yourself that you cannot do it. You're going to let yourself down. You're going to think too much about what you did, when in reality what you did, as Bob Ross would say, was a happy little mistake. There is no happy little accident, my apologies. There's no mistakes when it comes to painting. Obviously, if you're doing a commission painting and they're asking for a specific color in a specific area, you want to try to make sure that you do abide by that, because you are at the service of the person you are doing the commission for. But if it's just your own miniature like this one, for me, I am just going with the flow, making sure I hit all of the miniature with that. Now, you might see me looking over to my right a little bit, and that's because on the wereboar, there is some jacket, or looks like possible fur that might be like tufts of it popping up, which is where that wolf gray is going to be coming into play as well. But with every Nosler figure, and I'm pretty sure a lot of companies do this as well, they put a little example on the back of the figures. So if you see me look over, it's because I am looking at the figure, trying to see if, with this werebear, if it had fur all across its body, or if there was some clothes. Now, obviously we can add clothes if we choose to. I am choosing not to, because I think he looks a little bit better without it. So that's base coat 1 down. As you can see, it's already showing that red through, and that's what we wanted. We wanted to kind of dilute the brown, show off that red a little bit, and go from there. Now there is a spot right there I'm trying to get. There we go. So, while he finishes drawing, we're going to go back to the wereboar. So, I'm going to grab him, put him in there. We're going to go back to the brown. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on his pants, because he does have a set of pants. Now, you see that I didn't follow my own rulings, which was always dip your brush. So, that's one of those happy little accidents, or happy little mistakes. Accidents, yeah, that I mentioned. Because I can pull that paint around and make sure we're hitting every location. Now, if there is a figure that you all want to see painted, I'll put up, or I'll read the comments. I'll double check what all you all have suggested, and I'll see if that's something that we may be able to do. Maybe we'll do it for a live stream or a just random video. I'm going to try keeping these videos under an hour, except for live streams, of course. Now he's got a little belt. I'm thinking we hit that belt with some barbarian flesh. Kind of separate the dark tones that we've given him. Now that's one thing that I have rarely seen on a Nosler figure that I am impressed with. For those of you that don't know, Noslers is the official D&D miniatures. Now, typically, they try to keep it fantasy related. Now, this was the first time I've actually seen an actual belt buckle on a figure. So as you can see, we got the belt down. He's got a little bit of fur standing there. Looks like it might be a part of him based on that. And we can go back and paint some stuff over. It might be kind of like a tunic type thing where it's like a hole splits open. And we'll look into that later. We're going to go back to the monster brown. And I'm going to do a quick touch up on one of his legs. The reason I'm doing a quick touch up is because I noticed that it wasn't holding the paint properly. So I just want to make sure we get that down. And if you see that something is pulling in an area you do not want it to pull in, feel free to take your brush and just move it around. Because that's the thing with these paints, is they are acrylic. So with acrylic paints, they are fairly easy to move around. Now, the good thing about us painting the wereboar gray was the simple fact that it gives a decent hue on those pants. We're going to move back over to... Actually, no, we're going to do one more coat on those, on that belt. This way we just get a nice pop of the belt. If you want to see all of the finished miniatures from the channel, they will be up on my Facebook page. My Facebook page is the same as my YouTube channel name, and that is Scarecrow Miniature Paints. There will also be a link down in the description so that you have access to it. Now, if you ever are worried on the base coat step of, well, Steve and I messed up, I put something in the wrong spot, don't worry about it. You are always going to have room to go back and adjust it. So, let's look over the werebear. I do see a spot that we missed that I'm going to touch up. But it's a good thing we missed that because we are going on to coat 2. Now, like I said, you want to do at least 2 coats of a base coat. The reason you want to do 2 coats is because you want to give enough pigment to hold the remaining highlights, touch-ups, anything else you're doing. And there's always going to be somewhere you added, or somewhere you missed a spot, or the brush didn't go over how you thought it would, whatnot like that. But you can always go back over during any stage in the base coating process and touch that up, make sure that it gets hit. So for instance, we're doing base coat 2, so I'm just making sure that everything is filled, that he is the exact tone that I want him to be at, that I can still see all the good details on him, and that anything that I feel needs to be spread around gets spread around. So we're going to take him off his pedestal and we're going to move back to the wereboar. The wereboar is honestly going to be the easier one to finish. Now you keep seeing me go over here. That's because I'm using my paint pot to wash my brush. You always want to wash your brush before you go to any other paintings. So with the wereboar, I'm liking how the pants look. I think it's time that we move on to that hammer of his. So we are going to go over here into this brown. This brown is wood grain. So his hammer, I was thinking we go full brown. Now there is a little bit of patch on it where metal might go. And since we do have metal, figured we could leave that there for it. And we have a little strap. We'll do a touch-up with that strap after we finish the handle, because with that strap we are going to go and hit it up with the flesh, or I'm thinking we do the mummy ropes, my apologies. So now what you see me doing right now is I'm just trying to get as close to the edge of that hammer as I can with the brown. I want to leave some open because I want it to kind of look like the metal is wrapping around it. So while we're waiting for that to dry, we're going to move on to our dark bluish gray color wolf gray. Now, this is my first time using this paint color, so I'm excited to see how it turns out along with you guys. So we're going to just paint the top of his head. Just got a little bit of fur right on the inside too that we're going to do. and his back. Like such. Now, it's fine that that's pretty bright right now, because we're going to go over with something else. We are going to go over with a dark shade. Now, you keep hearing me say the word shade and wash. They are interchangeable. With shades, the good thing about them is, or washes, is that it gets in those recesses. So, what I'm doing now is all of that fur tuft that we saw before, that we weren't sure if it was him or not, we're just going to cover up with Monster Brown. And the reason we're covering this up with Monster Brown is just so we can give a little bit of flash to him, make him stand out a little bit more. And because it is a nice highlight to the pants. And he's got a little bit of tuft on the pants at the bottom of the feet here. So now that that part is done, we are going to move on to the next exciting part. I'm going to be using Japanese World War II because he's got these leather bracers on his arms. And I want to hit that up with a little bit of that. And you know what? That is actually a more perfect color for that hilt. Leather strap as well. So we're just going to take that, brush off some of that. We're going to go around. We're going to paint it just like that. Now you might be worrying, well, it's dark right now. I mean, or it's a little too light right now. Well, that's all going to be cleared up. Once we get to the stage of the wash, you'll see what I mean by it will get cleared up. With washes, they typically hide in the recesses. However, you can wash it over the entire body as well. And it will darken up every little bit. So, I'm going to leave the boots the color they are now. We're going to hit that strap because that wood grain turned out perfect. So, I'm going to take this. If I get quiet, I do apologize. I typically do get quiet whenever I paint. But as you can see, it's on that handle now. Now, he is almost done. So, what we're going to do all we got left to do is his tusks. His mouth and his teeth. So we're going to go to a different brush right now. We're going to go to a more finite brush. The reason we're going to a different brush is because we want a smaller detail. We're going to a little bit more finer detail. You want a tinier brush. Now, you don't want to leave your brush in the water, obviously. But I had to make sure that one was cleaned off. Now, when doing teeth, you want to hit the edge of the mouth. Sometimes the teeth show up, sometimes they don't. So you want to just brush it over the edge of the mouth to where it's not pulling, like so. Like I said, all of these miniatures will be on my Facebook page. They will also be on here, of course. And you might even see them on Reddit or many other channels as well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint a small little tongue on the inside of that mouth. And what that's going to do for us is make it easier for us to transition. In fact, let me check something here. Sorry about that. I think I used the wrong red. I think I used the blood effect red. Nope. So red's a little bit tougher of a cookie to paint. For those that didn't know, it tends to expand outwards. So that's another thing you can do. If you didn't know, if you don't have a brush cleaner at home, you can just do that. Now I'm going to take a little black. I'm going to paint that socket in. I'm also going to touch his ear up on the inside. As well, to give it a little bit of shadow. So all we have left to do on him is the feet. Again, I'm going to do another base coat of that on the feet. And I'm going to leave his base. Oh no, we're going to do mud with him. He is a little pig. We got to give him some mud. I'll do some mud effect on the other one as well. But he's just perfect for mud now. After this, all we have left for him is his mallet. Now with his mallet, it's going to be a little bit easier because all we have left to do on that is metal. That's not the metal I need. I'm just going to do a drop of the metal. Make sure. Got some. With metal paint, it is hard to see if you got the pigment on it without dipping the whole brush. And I am not a fan of dipping my entire brush to see that. These little finite details are what can make or break a miniature, in my opinion. If you don't got enough, it falls flat. Obviously, some miniatures work perfectly fine with just the bare minimum. Others, however, do not, and you want to make sure that you have them popping. Now, there's some spots with the gray. I'm going to take my more fine-tuned brush and get like the hand here, back of his arm, back right there, just because it's some spots that we did miss when we were doing the initial base coating. I see one spot we missed on the Monster Brown. Okay, so he's done for right now. Let's move back to his buddy. Now, with this one, we're going to start, since the base coat is fully done, we're just going to start with the wood. So, with this wood, I'm going to be as detailed as possible because I want it to kind of pop. I want it to look like he's had this for a while, so I'm also going to be mixing in a little bit of the World War II Japanese, as the Vallejo company called it, because we don't want too much brown. That's gonna pull away from where we want people to look. Like I said earlier, you don't want too much color because you don't want too many people looking at one area that you do not want them to. That our first coat of the wood is done. Now there is a spot and the fur that I saw we missed. Right in this crevice of his hand. Now, normally, if it's something small like that, and it's just mine, I'm trying to make a tabletop ready, I would not go back over it, but for you guys, I am. Now, the next thing we can do with him is our metal. So, just like we did with the hammer, we are going to go over all of this with the metal. Now, you might be asking, why am I not putting this one on my napkin and brushing it off? Well, the pigmentation of metal is a little bit finicky. You want it to stick. And sometimes you don't want it to be too shiny, sometimes you do. I prefer my metals to be shiny. They do make training kits for non-metallic metallics. I will be doing one of those in the future. That is a technique that I am still gradually learning myself. With a non-metallic metallic, it's exactly how the name sounds. It is a wood, mostly wood, based looking metal. You take grays and you highlight the figure. With the paints you have that are non-metallic, and it gives the effect of metallic. So, with that done, we are going to move to his claws now. You're going to see me pick this up for a second. Yes, there are some claws. They are just hard to read. I see one there. Okay, I see some. Now, I always start with the feet claws. I find that feet claws are easier to spot, so they're easier to do. With claws, you really just want to, you can see it on there. It might be hard. You can see it kind of right there. You just want to lightly brush over the claw to give the effect that the claw is there. Okay, so he's pretty much done. Now, I did say I was going to mix some of this in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this out of the area I have it. I'm going to take some of this brown. I'm just going to mix it. Let my pot soak that up. I'm just going to streak that throughout the wood. Now what this should do is it should be just thin enough that it doesn't cover up the wood grain, but gives off the illusion that the wood is exactly like that. And that dark red wood that we had should bleed through a little bit. What I like about that is actually the perfect color we are going to use for our mouth that I mentioned before. Okay. So when doing a mouth like this, you want to try and get everything at least an attempt at getting everything symmetrical. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do the nose and the eye. Now the nose is going to be pretty simple. We just poop it a couple of times. Knock off some of the excess. Because right now with that being wet, we don't want to get it too far over. Because we don't want it blending in with that paint we put on there. We want to cover up what was there. And as you can see, we did the nose, the mouth. Now we can do the teeth, and we can do the tongue. Now once again, tongue is kind of hard to do, especially with such a curvature that they have currently on this piece. So we're going to just stamp that on the inside. We're going to take a dollop of the mummy robes. I'm just going to run it over the top. Because like I said in the beginning, sometimes nozzlers, miniatures are easier to work with. Sometimes they are not. In this scenario, they are not because of the fact of how they molded it. But there we have it. We have a full working werebear. Now we can touch up the claws a little bit. I'm going to touch up these claws for sure. And now, as I mentioned in the first episode, we're also going to be doing a dry brush. Now, for those of you that don't know what a dry brushing is when you take a lighter shade of your base coat, in this case the Monster Brown, you brush it to where almost nothing comes off, and you just brush it on there. What this will do is it'll highlight the fur. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to highlight the fur while keeping those recesses dark. But it should only pick up on the raised edges. Now with fur like this, it's a little bit harder to do a dry brush, but it does show up still, which is the good thing. I've done a dry brush on a winter wolf before, and that, aside from my red young dragon, was one of my favorite paint jobs that I've ever done. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to get that first brush we had. And give me 1 second, I'm going to clean out a new pot so that we can get our effect paints going. Okay, welcome back. Like I said, we're going to get our effect paints going. Effect paints can be done in one of two ways. You can do them after the washes, which will highlight the shading. I personally don't do that because to me, it vibrants the different tones. Whereas if you do it on the actual figure itself before the wash, it turns out, in my opinion, a little bit better. We are also going to be doing a dark wash after the fact. So, without further ado, let's get this going. My phone just notified me that I'm at 15%, so I'm trying to hurry this up with you guys. And I know we've been at this for a long time already. So, wet mud, glistening blood, and dark tone. So, first thing I'm going to do is I am going to take my finite brush, mix that glistening blood in, take some of it off, and I'm going to touch up this battle axe. Now, what I enjoy most about painting blood effects, there's multiple ways you can do it. I tend to paint down the hand and on the blade itself. But you don't want it to be even, because then it looks purposefully put there. So how do you fix that? You might be asking. This is my second favorite trick of it. Take a dry brush, get it full, and then sling it methodically at the figure, and you get a blood splattered bear. Now, what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to hit it from the back a little bit to try and get it on the axe a little bit more on both sides. Okay, that is good enough. Now I'm going to just sit there and wash my fingers real quick. And if the camera looks a little bit fuzzy now because of it, I do apologize. I will fix that in a moment. Next, we're going to be doing our mud brown. So the reason why I didn't really mind doing a quick touch-up of the claws was because of this. He's a bear. He's been mucking around through the mud. They're going to get a little dirty anyway. So we're going to just lightly plop that on him. It shouldn't really show up on him per se. However, his friend, if you remember correctly, we still got the wereboar's base to do, did have ways for it to show up. What I'm doing real quick is I'm just touching up the actual bottom of the base, trying to get to dry a little bit faster. This way we can move on to the dark coat. So same thing, get your mud, plop it down. Now the good thing about the boar is he's got some boots. Remember, we left those boots black for a reason, gray. You can hit those boots at random locations to give the effect that he's muddy. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to take the werebear, I'm just going to try and touch it up to where it will speed up the drying process a little bit. Because you don't want the mud mixing with that dark shade. You want it to be a little bit dry, so I'm trying to clean up some of it while still leaving the color on it. Okay, so that looks like it did the job. Let's look at this one. This one we can go through and do the dark shade because there's only a little bit left. And this one was more of a guinea pig than the other one. So, for shade, just like the red, take it and hit every crevice with it. Now, typically what you want to do, as to not oversaturate it, like I said when we first started, is you only want to hit the recesses you want shaded. However, I want this whole guy shaded. There's a reason behind that. I want him to be a little bit darker. There's some spots on him where I feel a bit more dull coloring will suit him better than the somewhat light color we have now. I'm going to hit that base with it too. What that will do is it'll get in those recesses, and I can move that around the recesses and kind of mix it all together. But there you have it. You have the wereboar, which will be going up on my Facebook once it dries. And while we have it, we will be doing the werebear. At least the body. The body is what I really wanted to touch on with the werebear, because I wanted those I wanted those recesses to show up a little bit darker, and I wanted it to kind of pop with that blood effect. Now, it'll take about another hour or two before these start to darken, as they should. So you will see the finalized effects on my Facebook. But we are also going to hit that metal as well, trying to get it to dilute a little bit, but not too much. So, with that being said, thank you for going on the journey of painting not just a werebear, which honestly turned out amazing. As you saw, there was some pooling that I'm sucking up. And it's already doing what it needed to do. But we also did the wereboar, which even with that little bit that we did turned out amazing. So, once again, thank you for your time, and thank you for watching Scarecrow Miniature Paints. I'm Steven. Have a great day.